What kind of love story reaches a point where a private island becomes more than a fantasy and turns into a symbol of devotion? That was the question echoing across the world when reports emerged that Lee Min-ho had surprised Song Hye Kyo with something so extraordinary, so almost unbelievable, that fans struggled to separate reality from imagination. A private island, not a vacation, not a temporary escape, but an entire piece of the world, set apart from everything else. The kind of place most people only ever see in travel documentaries or dream about in quiet moments. And yet, according to those close to the story, this was not about extravagance alone. It was about meaning. The story, as it began to unfold, did not start with the island itself. It started with a conversation. A quiet one that took place far away from cameras, red carpets, and the endless attention that had followed both of them for years. During that conversation, Song Hye Kyo reportedly spoke about something deeply personal.
She spoke about peace.
About the rare moments in her life when she could step away from the noise of the world and simply exist without expectation. For someone who had spent decades living under constant public attention, those moments were not just rare. They were precious. She described how, in her ideal world, there would be a place untouched by headlines. A place where mornings would begin with silence instead of notifications. Where nights would end without the glow of cameras. A place where she could simply be herself. Lee Min-ho listened. And according to those familiar with what followed, he did more than just hear her words.
He remembered them.
In the weeks that followed, something began taking shape behind the scenes. It was not impulsive. It was not rushed. It was deliberate. Lee Min-ho reportedly began exploring locations far removed from the busy centers of global attention. Places where nature remained undisturbed. Where the rhythm of life moved slowly. Where privacy was not just possible, but guaranteed. The process was complex. Private islands are not simply purchased like ordinary property. They involve extensive legal procedures, environmental considerations, and careful planning. But for Lee Min-ho, the challenge was part of the purpose. Because this was not just about acquiring something rare. It was about creating something meaningful. When the moment of the reveal finally came, it did not unfold in a dramatic or public setting. There were no flashing cameras, no press releases, no carefully staged event designed to capture headlines. Instead, the surprise reportedly began with a simple journey. Song Hye Kyo was told they were taking a short trip. A quiet getaway. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would hint at what was about to happen. The flight itself was calm. The destination unfamiliar. And when they finally arrived, the first thing she noticed was the silence. A different kind of silence. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of noise. No distant traffic. No crowded streets. Just the gentle rhythm of waves meeting the shore. As they stepped onto the island, Song Hye Kyo reportedly paused, taking in the surroundings. Crystal clear water stretching endlessly. Soft sand untouched by footprints. A landscape that felt almost unreal in its beauty. For a moment, she simply absorbed the scene. And then Lee Min-ho told her the truth. This place was not just a destination. It was hers. The realization did not come instantly. At first, she reportedly thought he was joking. The idea seemed too extraordinary to be real. But as he explained, as the details became clear, the weight of the moment began to settle in. This was not a temporary escape. This was a permanent space. A place where she could return whenever the world became overwhelming. A place designed not for public attention, but for private peace. Witnesses later described how Song Hye Kyo stood in silence for several seconds, looking out at the horizon as if trying to understand the magnitude of what had just happened. For someone who had experienced luxury throughout her career, this was something entirely different. Because it was not just about what the island represented. It was about why it existed. Lee Min-ho reportedly told her that he remembered the conversation they had shared. The one about wanting a place away from everything. A place where life could feel simple again. And he wanted to give her that. Not as a display of wealth, but as a gift of freedom. Freedom from the constant attention. Freedom to breathe. Freedom to exist without the weight of the world watching. For Song Hye Kyo, the emotional impact of that moment went far beyond the physical beauty of the island. She reportedly became overwhelmed not by the scale of the gift, but by the thought behind it, because it meant that he had listened, truly listened, to something she had expressed quietly, without expectation that it would ever become reality. In that moment, the island became more than land surrounded by water. It became a symbol of understanding, a symbol of care, a symbol of a love that paid attention not only to what was visible, but to what was felt. When the story eventually reached the public, the reaction was immediate and intense. Fans around the world expressed disbelief. Some questioned whether such a gesture could even be real. Others were simply stunned by the scale of what had been done. But beyond the shock, there was a deeper conversation taking place. Because people began to realize that the most extraordinary part of the story was not the island itself. It was the intention behind it. In a world where love is often measured through visible displays, this gesture felt different. It was not about being seen. It was about creating a space where they could disappear from the world together. And perhaps that is why the story resonated so deeply. Because beneath the headlines and the disbelief lay a simple truth. Sometimes the greatest gifts are not the ones that impress the world. They are the ones that protect the person you love from it. A private island, not just as a luxury, but as a promise. A promise that no matter how loud the world becomes, there will always be a place where silence, peace, and love remain untouched. And yet, as extraordinary as the island itself seemed, what followed in the days after the revelation revealed something even more profound about the bond between Lee Min-ho and Song Hye Kyo. Because the island did not remain just a breathtaking surprise. It slowly became part of their story, a living, breathing chapter of their lives. According to those familiar with the moments that followed, Song Hye Kyo did not immediately explore every corner of the island. Instead, she chose something far simpler. She walked, barefoot along the shoreline, moving slowly as if trying to connect with the place in a way that went beyond its beauty. Lee Min-ho followed quietly behind, giving her space, understanding that this moment belonged to her. The sound of the waves filled the silence between them, creating a rhythm that felt almost meditative. At one point, she reportedly stopped and turned back toward him, her expression no longer marked by surprise, but by something deeper. Understanding. She asked him a question that many people might have asked in that moment. Why go this far? Why create something so vast, so permanent, for her? Lee Min-ho's answer, according to sources close to the couple, was not complicated. He told her that for years, the world had taken pieces of her time, her energy, and her privacy. Every project, every public appearance, every moment under the spotlight had demanded something from her. And he wanted to give something back. Not something temporary, but something lasting. A place where nothing would be taken from her. Only given. Those words reportedly stayed with her long after the conversation ended, because they revealed something that could not be measured in size or value. They revealed intention. In the days that followed, the island began transforming from a symbolic gift into a shared space. There were no immediate plans to build extravagant structures or turn it into a luxurious retreat filled with attention-grabbing designs. Instead, the approach was quiet and thoughtful. Simple spaces, open views, natural surroundings preserved rather than altered. It was not about changing the island. It was about allowing it to remain exactly what it was. A place untouched. A place honest. And in many ways, that philosophy mirrored the relationship itself. Unforced. Uncomplicated. Grounded in something real. One evening, as the sun began to set over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and deep orange, the two were seen sitting together near the water. There were no conversations that needed to be shared with the world. No moments designed for attention. Just silence. And in that silence, something became clear to both of them. The island was not the story. It was the setting. The real story was what they were building together within it. A life that balanced two very different worlds. The public life that demanded their presence, and the private life they were determined to protect. When the story of the island eventually reached fans across the globe, the reaction evolved beyond shock. People began reflecting on what the gesture truly meant. Some described it as the ultimate expression of love. Others called it a symbol of devotion that went beyond anything they had ever seen before. But many fans focused on something quieter. The idea that Lee Min-ho had not simply given Song Hye Kyo something extraordinary. He had given her something deeply personal. A place where she could exist without expectation. A place where she could step away from the identity the world had created for her and simply be herself. And perhaps that is why the story continued to resonate. Because beneath the scale of the gesture, there was a message that felt universal. Love is not always about grand displays. Sometimes it is about understanding what someone needs the most, and then finding a way to give it to them, even if that means creating an entire world where they can finally feel at peace. In the end, the island stood not just as a breathtaking piece of land surrounded by endless water, but as a quiet promise. A promise that no matter how loud life becomes, there will always be a place where everything slows down, where the noise fades, and where two people can simply exist together, far away from everything else.